Welcome to another episode of Community Issues. As usual, we are back with your favorite fortnightly program. Tonight, the topic for discussion is the political mess in Newham. Some of you may know that this has been in the public domain for a number of months now, and especially as of last week, it's been on the BBC News London, the Evening Standard, and also in the Newham Recorders. Sir Robin Well, who is the executive mayor of London Borough of Newham, has been the council leader since 1995 to 2002, and in 2002 he became the executive mayor, and ever since then he is the mayor to current day. It's a 100% Labour seat. There are about 60 councillors in the borough, and I believe one councillor has defected to an independent or has resigned. We will find out from our guest. The reason why we're doing this program today, as I said, that because lately it's been on the news, the selection process for the mayor hasn't actually happened in an open and transparent way. Instead, it was imposed, and some of the members of the Labour Party had taken a challenge, and as a result of that, they are having to rerun their selection process. My guests today are all either councillors or members of the Labour Party from Newham. My first guest is sitting on my left is Mr. John Saunders, who is a former councillor, and currently he is the West Ham CLP Treasurer. Mr. Saunders, very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming along.
Thank you.
Sitting next to Mr. Saunders is a councillor Anamul Islam, who is a Labour councillor in London Borough of Newham. Mr. Islam, a very big welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me today.
It's a pleasure to have you on board. Sitting on my left is Councillor Julianne Marriott. She is again a Labour councillor from East Ham. Madam, a very big welcome.
Thank you.
And sitting next to Julianne Marriott is another councillor, Councillor John Whitworth. Councillor Whitworth, a very big welcome, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to participate in the program, there is a free phone number on our screen. It's 0203 397 4740. You can phone in and ask any questions or make any suggestions. And our guest here tonight will try and answer any questions or queries that you may have in relation to the current political situation in Newham. Right, my first question is to Mr. John Saunders. From the two petitioners that we are aware of that took this process or challenged the Labour Party, shall we say, you were one of them. Can you tell us exactly what's been happening in Newham and why you decided to challenge the Labour Party with a legal challenge?
Well, you gave a fairly good summary of the process. Every 4 years, we re-elect our councillors and our mayor, and Newham is one of 3 boroughs which has a directly elected mayor, 3 boroughs in London, that is. And the Labour Party, of which we are all members of, has a process of allowing Labour Party members to look at the incumbent, which is Robin Wales, to see whether we want to automatically reselect him or whether we want to compare his manifesto or his aspirations with that of other members in the borough. And this time round, when we went through this process, which is colloquially known as the trigger ballot process, each of the branches meet and the members discuss whether they want to automatically reselect the mayor or have what we call an open selection where other people can compete, put their views alongside Robin Wales. And this time a majority of the branches chose to ask for an open selection. Robin has been there, as you said, for a long period of time, and members felt this was the time when we should be able to look at other views to see whether they may be preferable to what Robin had to offer. So the branches, the majority of the branches chose for an open selection, but also the trade unions and the socialist societies also have votes in this process, and some of us were very surprised about some of the societies which were alleged to be affiliated to the Labour parties in Newham, and we were surprised at the way some of the trade union branches operated. So we challenged this. We asked the National Executive Committee, which is the superior body in the Labour Party, to look at the process and investigate it. They were very unwilling to do this.
Why do you think that was the case?
Well, once they've come to a conclusion, all large bodies do not like to retrench. They do not like to admit that something might have gone wrong, and I think that was really what it was about. So, but we were quite determined because we were really concerned about this. We wanted a fair and open process, particularly as the members had shown as a majority that they wanted to have what we've called an open selection. So we, two of us, plus the support of about 20 others and a background group of about 100, so there were about 100 people involved in this process. We decided to employ a solicitor to look at whether we had a case, whether what had happened was legal or not.
Sorry, so can I just stop you there? I mean, why did you have to employ a solicitor in order for your party, the Labour Party, to listen to you and to ensure that members get their democratic right in exercising who they want to choose as their candidate?
Well, I wish I could say that there was a process in the Labour Party which allowed us to put this forward in some other way, but actually there isn't. We approached, as I said, the national body, the NEC, and they refused to look into it. They claim that an investigation has taken place, but when we looked into that, it was a 5-minute look at the results. So we were very unhappy with what had happened, and we made several approaches. We put in a document of about 16 pages, which included all of the things which we thought had gone wrong. And we presented this to the NEC, but they still refused to look at it. Now,
why is that? Is that because Robin Wells has the upper hand? He's got some people in the NEC who maybe have been favouring him?
Well, I think it's partly because lots of constituencies make complaints or want things to be looked at again, and the NEC has got into the habit, I'm afraid, of saying, well, the best thing to do is to not respond and hope that people will go away. There is
but in order to ensure natural justice, you would think that each and individual case has its own merits, and that party would look at each cases depending on the merits of the case. And in your case, as you said, you put 16 pages of documents together pointing out where the party had failed to give members the right to exercise their democratic process. That had not been the case.
What you said is correct. That and it was because the Labour Party was not prepared to look at this that the only real option to get the National Executive Committee to respond in a realistic manner was not to take them to court, but to go to court to see, for us to present our evidence, the 16-page document, and the NEC to put its opposition, and allow an independent body, namely a judge, to decide whether we were right, whether they were right, whether the process was sufficiently flawed that it should be either run again or we should have gone straight to an open selection. what happened was, in December of 2017, just a few months ago, we got to the point where our solicitor and the NEC solicitor...
So who paid for the legal costs? Was that yourselves, the petitioners, or for your part? Presumably the Labour Party have their own lawyers, so it wouldn't cost them anything.
Well, they would, in fact, using my membership fee to...
Yes, of course.
that's
we
that's
paid
the way
for
these
it.
things go. But, I mean, I put a few £1,000s in, other people did. We had a crowdfunding...
So in order to prove your point and to prove that the party hadn't followed the process, you had to fork out, and people like yourselves who were other petitioners had to put their hand in their pocket to come up with the cost in order to challenge the party in its wrongdoings.
Yes. I mean, you're talking to a group of people who are really committed to the Labour Party and really want the Labour Party to perform in a fair and transparent manner. And when it doesn't, occasionally that will happen in any organisation, when it doesn't, you either give in or you fight. And occasionally you think, well, this is sufficiently important to fight. And we felt this was an important situation.
So what happened in a nutshell at the end? Did the Labour Party lawyers give up?
What happened? Well, in a nutshell, we got to the point where the Labour Party solicitors were talking to our solicitor, and we can only surmise that they thought we had such a good case that if it went to court, then the judge would rule either that would rule that the process was flawed, and therefore they agreed to rerun the process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saunders. I will come back to you. Let me go to the councillor, John Whitworth. We've heard what Mr. Saunders had to say.
Yep.
What was your involvement in this process with the trigger ballot, and what do you think should happen now?
Well, I was involved all along, really, since from the first trigger ballot to the second, in a similar way to John. I supported the move to try to get the Labour Party NEC to agree to our request, because we sent in, if we go back to December 2016, there were 47 of us wrote to the NEC to ask them to cancel the trigger ballot process and rerun it, or have an open selection, because we thought it wasn't done properly. And so from then on,
so what
we were
was the
trying to
problem with
persuade
the party to have an open selection? Why weren't they listening to you? What was the problem?
Well, I think, as John has suggested, really, the NEC, the ruling body of the Labour Party, is in the habit, really, of supporting those that are already there in place. And that's a kind of reflex that it normally does. It's rather a conservative attitude, but it tends to support those that are already there. And they have a history, really, of supporting the Mayor of Newham on different issues that have arisen, in previous years.
So, how long has this process been going on for then? You said that you've started back in December 2016.
Yeah.
So it seems like that the party had more than a year to put it right.
Exactly.
And they still haven't put it right.
Exactly. And if we look at this, it does seem a lot of time that's perhaps been wasted, particularly if we look now, we're on the second trigger ballot, and the Mayor of Newham has actually made a call for people to vote no, that it's for an open ballot. Now, we were asking an open selection. We were asking for an open selection from December 2016. So really, a year and 2 months has gone by. We could say that has been wasted, because the Labour Party didn't want to recognise that the first trigger ballot was flawed, didn't want to hold an open selection, and now we've come to another trigger ballot that's been organised and people have to turn out. The London Regional Labour Party has to organise this, and it's going to be 2 weeks of voting when it's a foregone conclusion, because those that wanted an open selection all along, that is ourselves, are going to vote no. And now the mayor has called for his supporters to vote no. So really it's a foregone conclusion, rather a futile exercise, which could have been avoided, which is more time wasting really. It could have been avoided, A, if the mayor of Newham, after the complaints about the first trigger ballot, had recognised it and say, well, let's go to an open selection, or if the Labour Party NEC had agreed to that a month later. All this time, money and diversion could have been avoided.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whitworth. I'm now going to go to Councillor Julianne Marriott. Sorry if I haven't pronounced your name correctly. 12 months, 13 months have been wasted in trying to select a candidate. That still hasn't happened yet. And if you do go for an open selection, it may take you another 2 to 3 weeks to get a candidate in place, whether that be Sir Robin Wells or somebody else, depending on the member's choice. Do you think that gives you enough time to listen to the people of Newham, to go on doorstep, to do the campaigning? I mean, I'm fully aware that it's a 100% Labour-controlled borough, but you can never take things for granted. Will that give the politicians enough time to go out there and campaign, bearing in mind that May 2018 is your local council election as well as your mayoral election? Would that give you enough time to listen to the people, take their views on board, put that into a Labour Party manifesto, put it into some form of policies? What do you think?
So we should never ever take the electorate for granted. I think various votes recently have made that absolutely clear, and it certainly isn't ideal. We might be in a situation where we only have a month, 2 months, etc., to introduce candidates to the electorate. It's definitely possible, and we know it's possible because we respond to by-elections. So even Theresa May herself only called an election with a couple of months to go. So we know it's possible, but it's certainly not ideal. And the time before, we actually selected our candidates in the July for the following May. So those candidates had time to get their leaflets, to knock on doors, to go to events, to meet community leaders, all of those kind of things. And they just won't have the time to do that. Because I think the missing dimension here is not only have we not selected our mayoral candidates, we've not actually even selected councillors.
Oh God.
So you've got here 3 councillors, and we don't actually know in May whether or not we will be councillors. So we've got 2 processes going on here
At the same time,
which is a
Right.
lot of uncertainty
Right.
for the people of Newham. And if we have I'm pretty sure we're going to have an open selection, but the members may choose to reselect Robin Wales, or they may choose a new candidate.
Yes, of course.
And that's also not a lot of time for a new candidate to not only come up with a manifesto, but to start understanding what's going on. In an ideal world, and I hope what happens in Hackney, and I hope what happened in Lewisham as well, is there was an orderly transition.
Mm-hmm.
The mayor that was standing down would have time to introduce the new candidate, to ensure that they had briefings, and in this situation I can't see that happening.
Right.
So I think what's happened because of this year-long process, or longer than a year, is going to put a necessary amount of stress on the Labour Party, all of us canvassing, on the council and on the residents too, and what I can see could have been avoided. And even if you think that the legal challenge should have been resolved earlier, when they did decide that actually it looked like they were going to use their case, what they could have done is gone straight to an open selection.
Right.
So we've actually wasted, I think we heard on the 22nd of December, just before Christmas, that
Right.
the legal challenge was going to fold. And we are now, February the 11th, is when we're going to conclude the trigger ballots. So that is 6 weeks, 7 weeks, that
Right.
we could have perhaps cut out by going straight to an open selection.
Sure,
And
sure.
even more so, the fact that when Robin Wales himself then supported an open selection. So we've had members...
So what made Sir Robin Wells wait all this time to support an open selection now?
I think that is something that you may have to ask him yourself. My take would be is that we would have had 20 meetings because...
Can I just stop you, because we need to go on a break,
Okay.
and after the break we'll continue, and we'll come back to you, Councillor Islam. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay with us. We need to go on a short break. We'll be back very soon. Thank you. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we went on a short break. We are back. Thank you for staying with us. On the other end, if you have joined us, a very big welcome. We are talking about the political mess in Newham, and tonight my guests are all from Newham. They are either councillors from Newham or residents from Newham. Before we went on break, we had a resident with us in the panel. He's now been replaced by a councillor. His name is Councillor John Gray. Very good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on board. Thank you very much for coming along. Really appreciate you coming along and giving us your time.
Thank you.
We're a community channel, and we're always trying to work for the greater interests of the community. And any issues that affects the community, we are trying to bring it to the forefront so that they understand what's going on. And that's precisely what we are doing here tonight in relation to the political mess, as people would put it, going on in Newham. I will come to you in a minute. Before we went on break, I was talking to Councillor Julianne Marriott, and I was asking her about the timescale in terms of the local election, the mayoral election, and the selection process. And you were saying that you've only got about 2 months left.
Yeah, so I was just outlining that the mayor himself has now suggested that people vote for an open selection, and if he had done that when the news first came out that the Labour Party was no longer going to contest the legal challenge, then we could have avoided the last 6 weeks of 20 wards meeting, of affiliates making their decisions. And that's a lot of money on community centres that have been booked by wards, by people's time, childcare commitments, etc. So I'm slightly disappointed that we didn't go straight to the open selection, because perhaps by now we could have our candidate and we could be delivering leaflets and going out and talking to people.
Sure. So, do you feel bitter with the way things have turned out, or?
I think bitter's a bit harsh. I just think it could have been avoided. I think we've had a series of kind of decisions that have been made where we have now got to the situation that you just said, where we have not got much time to introduce potentially a new candidate.
Sure.
And don't forget, Robin Wales may be re-selected.
Okay, so do you think that the party perhaps, this should be a learning curve for the party? This is not the first time that the party has behaved in that manner. There's been many more cases, and Tower Hamlet is probably a prime example where these things have happened in the past. So do you think that the party ought to listen to members more than they have done in the past?
I think the Labour Party may now have realised that the first concerns about the result of that first trigger ballot in 2016, that perhaps there were a few issues there that could have saved everyone a lot of time and money. Definitely.
Right. Okay, thank you. I will come to you in a bit. I need to go to Councillor Inamul Islam. We've had similar problems in Haringey, where the executive mayor have been ousted out, shall we say. And some people say that this is because of momentum. Do you think momentum is the cause for rerunning the selection process in Newham?
I think in Haringey it wasn't an executive mayor. I think it was a council leader.
Council leader, right? Okay,
and
fine.
Coming back to momentum, momentum are not campaigning in Newham, in particular the trigger ballot in Newham. Momentum got loads of important campaigns to be busy with. I mean, in Newham, I don't think momentum need to campaign on the ground. One of the reasons I would say that is because there's already a mood and there's a mood for change in Newham, and it's not just coming from momentum membership. It's also coming from the different spectrums of the party, and I think it's something to do with when you have a mayor or a leader in power for nearly 25 years.
Yeah.
Eventually people get bored and they want to see change, or people are probably saying, yes, we're getting all these high-rise buildings, all these developments, but, how is it really benefiting the community, the constituents, the residents? And after a while, like I said, whatever the reason, whether they're getting bored or whether they think that, look, this is not for us, it's for the rich maybe, or maybe we want to see something different. We want to take the politics to a different direction. Now, coming back to Newham and the Labour Party within Newham, what we found that there's already a mood, a campaign from, like, for example, one of the your panelists, Julianne Marriott, she's not a Momentum member, but she's been quite active as well on the ground. I mean, because when you've got a campaign, a successful campaign on the ground already, which is working towards a change, Momentum doesn't see a need to put the resources on the ground to mobilise to pick up a campaign, because we've already got a successful campaign on the ground. What you've got
is Momentum a wing of the Labour Party, or are they a wing of Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, it's supposed to be Momentum is supposed to be a campaign group trying to push certain campaigns within the party, perhaps take the party to change the party, should I say, or democratise or transform the party towards perhaps a socialist platform, something which the Labour Party was when it was set up.
I mean, I think we're getting sort of distracted here now into a conversation about momentum. I think if you take it back to 2016, we had a trigger ballot process where I think most people went to their ward meetings and genuinely heard a conversation about democracy and about choice and about openness.
Right.
And they saw that they could either reselect Robin Wales, or they could have an open selection where they could also choose Robin Wales, but they also had the opportunity to hear from other candidates.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people went along to those meetings and just thought, well, why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we hear from some others? Why
I mean, when members pay their membership fee, they have that right to exercise their democratic process in choosing a candidate.
Absolutely.
And when that is taken away from them, people feel very frustrated.
Yeah.
Do you think that has been the case?
Absolutely. I really think it has. I think when members turn up on November nights, go to their local meetings and basically vote for an open selection, and I will keep reiterating this, a vote for an open selection wasn't necessarily anti-Robin Wales, it was about having a choice.
Choice, right.
So they went to their meetings, often in freezing cold community centres, and they said that they wanted choice. And then they heard later that affiliates, unions, Christians on the left, Fabians, other groups had voted to keep Robin Wales, and that overruled them. And in this current climate, I just think it was not great for members to hear that actually their view didn't count, their campaigning, their knocking on doors didn't count, and they were being overruled.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that.
To be clear, it's a very broad coalition from all parts of the party, from the right, from the centre, from the left, from Muslims, from Hindus, from Christians,
whatever.
Young, female, what a really broad coalition. And we will disagree on many things, but we disagree that there should be an open selection and the right to democratically choose who will be our next leader.
And there were basically 20 different debates.
Right.
There were 20 wards.
Look,
and 20 different
I'm going
debates.
to now ask Councillor John Gray, just moving away from the selection process. I mean, Sir Robin Wales has been in power, leader of the council, as I said earlier on, from 1995 to 2002, and he's been an executive mayor since 2002 to present day. For someone to be in power for that length of time, Newham must have gone through a great transformation, with high rises going up. They were hoping to attract middle class citizens to move into the borough. Whether that has happened or what, I don't know. And maybe the locals in that process got pushed out. But the £52 million of investment that was made in the Olympic Stadium had been a waste of taxpayers' money. Would you not agree?
I agree, a shocking waste of money. And perhaps the worst aspect of this is sometimes you can understand that you take risks when you invest in money, but this is public money.
Yes.
And the first thing that backbench councillors like myself, Julianne, Atn and John heard about the pending disaster in the London Stadium was about page 125. A footnote of a report.
Deeply embedded.
And we had no idea whatsoever that the stadium had turned into a car crash, and we were assured that the money is safe. It's not been written off. There's a big debate about this.
We had the word impairment. Long debate over what the word impairment meant.
So, in terms of the truth coming out, it wasn't coming out, it was withheld, is that what you're telling us?
There's an issue, I think, in Newham, and not Newham, in other local authorities as well, where there's a cult of secrecy,
Right.
where information is not publicly disclosed, it's not transparent,
Right.
and it's not open. And once you have problems such as this, then it makes it more likely than not that problems are going to get out of control. If we had known as councillors about the problems in the stadium 2 or 3 years ago when they apparently first came about, then perhaps we could have put pressure, come out with different ideas to try to resolve the problems and stop us losing all that money.
Yeah. I'm going to add a slightly
So-
different spin to it again.
Yeah,
So Newham has to make decisions now about where it gets its income from.
right.
And that is because central government is no longer giving local authorities any money. And that's leading to authorities like Newham and others having to make investments, whether it's buying car parks, whether it's buying trading estates,
Sure.
whether it's investing in the
Okay.
stadium. So on the one hand, you can see that perhaps this was a sensible idea and would be making us huge amounts of money to come. But when we looked into it, and I'm on the audit committee, John is on investments and accounts, the due diligence just doesn't appear to have been done properly.
Right, okay.
And we're not just talking about any investment, we're talking about one that has got a premiership, a worldwide famous football team sat in it,
Sure.
which is always going to get far more scrutiny than when you invest in a shopping centre or you invest in a car park or something. And not only were we alarmed at the lack of transparency and the fact that we were only finding this out, when they decided to tell us, we were also concerned about the process and what other investments Newham is making that may turn out to be as ill-conceived as
So
as
what
they
I'm
are.
hearing then, just correct me for the benefit of our viewers, that Sir Robin Wells hadn't been transparent and open about the taxpayers' money that he had invested. And in terms of return, there is no return. So in terms of filling the gap, perhaps, that money is not going to come from anywhere, is it?
John and Julianne were talking about a process which lacks transparency with regard to the stadium, but this is true over so many other matters as well.
Such
over
as?
a number of
Such
years.
as?
There were, very often.
Can you give us some examples of other areas where perhaps his investment have failed?
Well, I'm talking not just about investment. Well, certainly there is the case about the borrowing of so-called Lobo loans, which is rather complicated. But years ago, the council borrowed a lot of money under terms which were, most experts agree, were very favourable to the banks and unfavourable to the lenders, to the borrowers.
Borrowers, right.
And this is not widely known by most councillors and the public, and it's difficult to get information. So really this is an example, if you like, of where the members of the council are not always aware of the decisions made, and this lack of transparency is one of the reasons why some people want to change, because they think there should be openness, debate and proper scrutiny, and that has been rather thin really in Newham under the mayoralty.
Could I suggest as well, though, that there is a real problem, is people do not understand how powerful a directly elected mayor is. People seem to think, it's a bit like a civic mayor, somebody who just cuts ribbons, opens schools and things. It's not. It's a hugely powerful position. It controls £150 million budget, employs thousands of staff. We've got £1 billion turnover, and the power is totally concentrated in the hands of the mayor, who in this, quite legally has decided not to delegate any powers to any other councillors, but to keep all the powers to himself. Now, maybe a mayor needs to be powerful to get things done, but if you have somebody with that much power, you must have checks and balances in place to hold that power to account.
But surely that's the case with any directly elected mayor. It's the same in Tower Hamlets, it's the same in Lewisham,
Absolutely.
and anywhere else where there's a directly elected mayor.
And there was different governance things in place in Tower Hamlets and Lewisham, which I think Newham should look strongly at. But also remember, the Mayor of London is a very powerful position, but he is like a regional mayor, and there are 32 stroppy London boroughs underneath Sadiq who will hold him to account. And they've all got their own legal departments, their own press departments. So again, a unitary mayor, like we've got in Newham and Tower Hamlets and Lewisham, is immensely powerful.
Sure.
And that power needs to be held to account.
Right.
Indeed. Yeah.
Okay, so, all right. Now, we know that the directly elected mayor is very powerful, and you're saying that in Newham there isn't the checks and the balances in place to hold the mayor to account. But in terms of the mayoral term of office, I was led to believe that any directly elected mayor could only get elected for 2 terms. What had happened here in Newham, and I'm sure it's the case in other places as well now?
This was a Labour Party rule. It's not the law.
No.
But the Labour Party rule said when the directly elected mayors came in 2002, that a mayor could only serve 2 terms and no more. There wouldn't be a trigger ballot or anything else. 2 terms would be the limit. But
so how did this rule change then?
Well, representations were made to the NEC, and it was in 2008 that
by party members?
By the mayors of London.
Okay.
There were 3 directly elected mayors in London, and others, but they were among them, made representations to the NEC for this rule to be removed. And indeed it was. And
the NEC has the power to do this without it going to an AGM and change the rules?
Absolutely, it's a ruling body. And
yes, so the NEC.
Julian wants to come.
Yeah, the
Julian,
NEC is the decision-making body of the Labour Party, the same one that has been involved in this legal dispute.
NEC, yeah.
But from what I understand, it was probably the Olympics, wasn't it, coming up, and it was Ken Livingstone was involved as well. So the Labour Party basically, once it realised, we're going to have open selections and change our mayors, thought, actually, we'll change it and hopefully they'll stay.
So in order to ensure continuity, the party changed the rules to suit itself, is what you're saying?
Well, it was to suit the mayors that were in place, and one of the arguments, as Julianne said, was the Olympics in 2012.
Right.
Newham
and do you think that had been the case? You're sitting very quietly, not...
Most unusual thing.
Yes, I was going to say.
I was told to behave myself today.
All right, okay.
So I'm trying to behave today. So
okay, I won't ask you who told you that, but for the benefit of
all of us.
Okay, what do I have to say about this? I mean, first of all, me personally feel that any changes, mayoralty, obviously, like John said, is a very powerful position, and I agree that there should, 2 terms is good enough for a mayor, but the changes that came through the NEC, I have to say something, might not be liked by the hierarchy and I might get told off for this, but that decision should have come from the party sovereign body, which is...
Councillor Islam, democracy is all about speaking your mind, speaking for the people that you represent. It's not the fact that you're going to get told off by somebody else that should prevent you from speaking your mind.
I'm not worried about someone else, I'm worried about my colleagues, my comrades here. But what I was going to say, the party sovereign body should have been the body that should have made that decision.
Right.
I'm not comfortable that NEC, NEC, yes, of course, they are quite powerful and they have rights to change policies, but the NEC should have given that decision to the party sovereign body, which is the National Conference, which we have every year, and the members should have had a say on it. But
this had clearly not been the case. It seems like that the NEC
my understanding is that it wasn't.
That the NEC have decided to change the rules based on the representation that was made by the executive mayors and some others.
Yeah.
And also given the fact that we had Olympic in 2012 and they felt that it would perhaps be better to keep the same mayors continue.
I take a slightly different position from Anam. I'm not actually convinced the 2-term limit is correct. I would have been more than happy for Barack Obama to have done another term rather than hand over to Donald Trump coming in. But I think that after we need a process where you have an open selection, and that open selection to me would allow the incumbent mayor to make their case, and it would make other people be able to make their case,
Yeah, of
and there
course,
will be
yeah.
hustings and a far
Look,
more.
if someone is good at their job, if
Yeah.
someone is open and transparent and accountable and is delivering to the people,
Yeah.
then I see no reason why members should not reselect them.
Yeah, that would be my take. So I take a slightly different approach. I'm not necessarily sure I want a 2-term limit, but this idea that you can keep rolling on with these trigger ballots, and so in a trigger ballot, only the incumbent can give a statement about what they've done.
Thank you.
So no one's
Julian,
allowed
we need to go on another
alternative.
short break. We'll be back. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't go anywhere. We'll be back very soon after the break. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. On the other end, if you have joined us, a very big welcome. The topic for discussion this evening is the political mess in Newham, and we've had a number of guests from Newham who are either councillors or residents of London Borough of Newham. We've talked about the political process and the way things have gone on since 1995. We've talked about the current mayor, and we've also talked about the selection process, and it wasn't until that some petitioners had challenged the process that they've decided to go for an open selection. We are joined again by Mr. John Saunders, who was one of the petitioners. Thank you for coming back, sir.
Thank you.
Just when we went on break, I had a couple of emails, and this email is from a gentleman called Mr. Mia, who lives in Newham, and he says, do we need an executive mayor in a London borough like Newham? What are your thoughts on this?
I think that's a really good question, because one can understand why you need a really powerful leader if you've got a big city like the Mayor of London or Manchester. Even there are perhaps problems. But when you've got a small borough, why do you need to put the power into the hands of one person and not share it more equitably with the other councillors? The vast majority of London boroughs, remember there's 33, I think,
That's
London
right,
boroughs.
33 London boroughs. Yeah.
29 of them have a system which is known as the leader and cabinet system, where the councillors choose their leader. So
On an annual basis.
they can do it on an annual basis. They
Or
normally do it
biannual
every
basis.
4 years.
Right.
If you've got a good leader, they will stay there. So at the end of 4 years, they are all re-elected, and they will then choose their leader again. And it is often the same person, but not always. And that means that leader knows that they're going to be accountable every 4 years at the minimum. So they've got to listen to other members of the council. They've got to share their views. And I think when you share views with people, you get much better decisions. I hope so, anyway.
Right. Okay. So, in a nutshell, what you're saying is that directly elected mayors are not a good idea, or someone who has too much power. Is that what you're telling us?
Well, there is a... I think the individual has got far too much power for such a small area. But there's an additional problem in Newham, where you've got all of the councillors are from one party, namely the Labour Party.
Well, I did. To be honest, you've actually tapped into the next email that I had.
Oh, well, let somebody else answer that one.
Another resident in Newham.
Can I come back to that first?
Yeah, sure.
I've got a slightly perhaps different take on it.
Yeah,
So
go on.
I also have slight concerns about the executive mayor and the amount of power they have. However, what I do quite like is, in theory, every member gets to choose who the executive mayor is, whereas with a leader and a council cabinet model, only the 60 councillors can choose who their leader is.
Yeah.
So I do sometimes worry with that model that the leader of the council gives enough jobs to people who are councillors and only they are choosing. And I actually do quite like the idea that every member gets a say. So I don't quite know where that leaves us.
I can't remember when you last voted
of
for Robin Wells to be the leader of the Labour Party in Newham.
No, but I mean,
but
generally, do you think that in terms of the decision-making process, that it's a lot quicker than perhaps having a leaderal system and a cabinet system?
But speed is not necessarily the only value here.
But local authorities have been criticised for taking far too long in deciding whether something should happen or not. Whereas an executive mayor has the power to make that decision there and then without having to
that
go
means
through
they
the
have the power
process.
to make the wrong decision quite
Absolutely.
quickly as well.
I mean,
So
And what do you think?
I feel that having so much power, I mean, executive power, I mean, people talking about speed, I don't quite agree with that narrative, because there's a concern around the transparency, the accountability. Someone can just veto a democratic vote of like 60 councillors in Newham. Now, we 60 councillors can effectively come out to put a policy forward.
Yeah.
And the executive power
Can turn around and say no.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in that sense, I think there's an argument coming from a democratic point of view. There's also an argument in terms of accountability, transparency.
So
and
are you saying then that having a directly elected executive mayor is not accountable, not transparent, has too much power and can do whatever they like?
I think
And effectively you can't do anything about it for 4 years?
Not accountable enough, not transparent enough,
Right.
not sufficient checks and balances.
Are in place.
Look, there's 21, I believe, local authorities in London run by Labour, and there's 4 by executive mayors. My
So
understanding
out of the 33 boroughs in London, 21
are controlled by Labour,
Labour, right, okay.
and of that 4 are executive mayors, and all the
So,
other
and those four are what? Newham, Tower Hamlets, Lewisham
and Hackney.
and Hackney.
and Hackney, right.
But so most of the councils are not mayors, and most of them, by and large, seem to be doing a decent job, delivering services to residents without the need to have an
So
executive
in
mayor.
your opinion then, if we put Newham aside and take the other 3 directly elected council, Tower Hamlets, Lewisham and Haringey and Hackney,
Hackney.
on a comparison basis, do you think they're doing better than Newham in terms of accountability, transparency and everything else that goes with it?
I think Newham, and I have researched the governance arrangements of the other executive mayors in London, needs to wake up and smell the coffee. We need to change. If we are going to keep an executive mayor model, and personally, I'm against it. I think there should be a referendum on the future, whether or not we keep a executive mayor or we get rid of it and go back to the more normal system.
The liberal system.
And so
with a cabinet.
With a cabinet.
Right.
But I think the difference is in those other 3 boroughs, so Tower Hamlets and Hackney and Lewisham, they haven't had the same mayor from the start. So there has been a change. The members there got to hear different opinions, and you know, they've had different mayors, whereas the trigger ballot system in Newham has continued ensuring we have the one mayor.
So do you think, in terms of perhaps selecting the mayoral candidate, that Newham ought to look at good practice elsewhere and take that on board? You seem to be shaking your head, so what do you think?
I've said what I think, which is there should be an open selection after 2 terms. That's my take.
Mr. Saunders, what do you think?
I was nodding actually, rather than I was agreeing with you.
That was your agreement that they ought to look at
Sorry.
good practices elsewhere.
Do you think there should be a 2-term limit? Because I don't think you were here when we had that conversation.
I certainly think that 2 terms is enough before you have an open selection. It is possible for a mayor
if
to be
someone's
so
doing a
good
good
that
job,
you,
if someone's doing a good job,
Yep.
then I see no reason why they should not be reselected.
No, and the
they
members
shouldn't have
should do
anything to fear
that, shouldn't
about.
they?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
they can't do that under the trigger ballot process, as we've proven this year,
Right.
even though the members wanted an open selection. In other words, they wanted to
Sure.
compare. They weren't allowed to do it. And
Thank you. Thank you,
yeah.
Mr. Saunders.
I mean,
I have a question for John Gray. What happens next in Newham in terms of the open selection process?
Do tell us, John.
Right, well, I'm a bit of a sort of magic ball crystal ball to try to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But, you know, because the candidate and most of the Labour Party members are now all saying vote no to Robin Wales being the mayoral candidate automatically. And there's going to be a count of all the branches and all the affiliates who have voted on Monday afternoon, the 12th of February. And we all assume, but people are still working hard, never assume anything in politics.
Is this done online or is this...
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay.
It will be done in, I think, Labour Party headquarters in East Ham. And the Labour Party proper, the officials of the Labour Party will be running that ballot.
Yeah.
And there will be an announcement, and again, we expect the announcement to be there will be this infamous open selection. Next, members will be invited to apply to the Labour Party about whether or not they're interested in applying.
Right.
Now, I must warn people, there's normally a qualification put on who can apply. It is probably going to be only existing councillors or people who hold public office. I think they've done that in the other ballots, but
Okay.
it's not my
Really?
decision. It's
I
not,
don't know.
I don't know.
Is that part of the selection criteria?
I believe so, because they would probably get
I mean,
100
but what
people
my understanding
applying.
is in other places there was criteria set restricting it to councillors or cabinet members. Was that in Lewisham or was it Haringey?
Well, Tower Hamlets, what happened? Did ordinary members apply?
How
No.
did it think? Because John Biggs wasn't
Yeah.
a councillor in Tower Hamlets at the time, was he?
No, he
before
was an
my
assembly
council.
member.
He was on the
assembly
GLA.
member.
GLA?
Yeah, if you hold,
Yeah.
or if you hold public office,
Right.
like MPs can apply, I believe.
Okay. So, and are there likely to be lots of candidates, do you think,
If it's open to every member, there's
There-
going to be lots and
lots
lots.
of candidates?
But I suspect there will be a restriction, and then there'll be what's called long-listed.
Yeah.
Then the Labour Party will appoint a panel
Panel to shortlist
who
it.
will shortlist it, look at application forms,
Yeah.
and there will probably be, I think there was 4 people in Lewisham, 3 people in
Aye.
5, I think
Yeah,
you're
but
right.
the original Lewisham one only came up with 2 candidates, didn't it? And they
Yeah.
had to reopen it. So let's hope that doesn't happen in Newham, because
So,
there wasn't time for that.
There's lots
I mean,
of...
is there lots of interest been expressed in Newham? Julian?
One person has put their name forward that I know of, and
That
it
you
said
know of?
categorically.
How about you, sir? Do you know of
Um,
many people that have perhaps expressed
I
their
know
interest?
at least 2 have said that they would put their names
Right.
forward.
Anam, what do you think?
I mean, there's rumours flying around. There could be a few candidates coming forward if they qualify.
Would you be interested in putting your name forward?
Me, first of all, I actually don't believe in the mayoral system, and that's a confession. I might be wearing a suit today, and look like someone who actually would love to be an executive mayor, but no, I wouldn't go for it. I don't want to go for something that I don't agree with.
John, would you be interested in going forward?
I'm not interested. I think the last thing... I'm not a wallflower, but the last thing that Newman wants is another middle-aged white bloke as mayor.
Okay. Look, whatever whoever the candidate is and whatever the process is, as long as the process is fair, open and transparent, that's what you're all asking for, aren't you, at the end of the
And
day?
of course, you have to remember that if Robin Wales wins,
Yeah.
then
Fine.
we are Labour Party members, and we will be knocking on doors to get Robin Wales
Elected.
elected.
We
So
believe in
you will be
democracy.
100% behind him.
Mm.
If the party members decided to re-select him, shall we say,
Yeah.
you would be 100% behind him.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if the party members chose not to, then whoever the Labour Party candidate is, you would be behind that candidate to ensure
Yeah.
that they win the next election.
But let's be clear, it has to be a fair and transparent process this time. So we do
What
not
would be a
want
fair and transparent process in your opinion, sir? Because you are one of the
process
petitioners, aren't you?
where more than one candidate is standing, and that no really good candidate is prevented from standing. And we must make sure that that doesn't happen.
And I might go a bit
Do you
further
think
than that.
that
It's
ought
about
to be the case? So
well,
what's your opinion and what?
but it's also about being able to communicate with members.
Right.
So the issue with this lack of time is that that person won't have a chance probably to go to members and email them or send them leaflets and say, this is who I am, this is what I'm standing for.
Yeah.
There would need to be hustings as well. I would like to see people have a chance to actually meet members.
Sure.
So to me, it's not just about the number of candidates, it's how they get to communicate and put their messages over.
Sure. What do you think, John?
Well, I'd say there are lots of talented people within the existing Labour group. Many have been excluded from participating in the mayoral system in recent years.
Yeah.
Again, that's the mayor's choice. He's got the power to that, and I'm excluding myself in this. But I can think, it's a matter of record that Councillor Roxana Fiaz has said she would put herself forward if there was an open selection. There are other experienced, competent, intelligent people who can walk and talk. And I also think it's about time we had a fresh face in Newham. Why can't there be a black mayor? Why can't there be an Asian mayor? Why can't there be a female mayor? It's
so it opens up the door for everyone.
yeah,
Anyone who's got the potential.
We need fresh blood.
put
We
their name
need
forward.
fresh ideas.
Yeah. It's impossible that there is not one of, 4,000 members now in Newham, that one of them is not suitably qualified to be an elected mayor.
Sure.
I don't know whether there'll be this councillor qualification or not, but 4,000
Do you feel
people.
the same, Anna?
I mean, I agree. I mean, we have got an executive mayoral system, so we've got to work with it. And I agree that we do need change. And I agree. I mean, ideally, I wouldn't mind seeing a female mayor. And there are loads of talents out there. And loads of talents that can, be leading 60 councillors. And managing 60 councillors is like managing a parent managing loads of kids, or a school teacher managing the nursery school kids.
Herding cats.
Sometimes, yeah. So I mean, it is a tough job. It's probably another reason why I wouldn't go for it.
So are you telling us and our viewers that the 60 councillors behave like children,
Sometimes.
and the mayor, whoever the mayor
I'm
is,
not going to
whether
name
it's
them, but I mean,
no,
yeah.
whoever the mayor is, whether it's Robin Wells or whoever it is, has to manage them.
I don't think that's true. I think if you treat people like grown-ups, they behave like grown-ups. And I would like to see a mayor who basically tries to get the best out of their group, who tries to work with them, tries to use people's talents, and I think people respond really well to being
Doris, you
treated
just
like
have to read.
adults.
Doris, you just have to read between the lines of what Juliana just said. So she's not very far off what I'm trying to.
Some councillors behave badly at times.
Right. Well, okay. Look,
So I mean, if the leader is leading correctly, then the councillors will.
well, at the end of the day, the way I see things, and my opinion may be different to yours, is whoever the leader is, that leader is the captain of the ship, and they have to pull the ship, together with the crew members. And that leader has to make sure everyone is on board.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you have to remember that 60 people have got
take
different
on board
Yeah.
people's strengths,
Yeah.
take on board people's
experiences.
weaknesses.
Yep.
Those that are weak, they need to develop on their weaknesses, and work together as a team to provide a service to the community at large. And a good leader
Yeah.
should take that on board.
We are all Labour members, we'll all be Labour councillors, and we all have pretty similar ideas to what we think is the best for the people of Newham.
Okay, look, leave the selection process aside for the time being. In terms of Newham as a borough, you're all councillors, apart from Mr. Saunders at the moment, who's not a councillor, but
But
you're
has
an
been.
ex-councillor, aren't you? What are the problems that exist in Newham that are quite perhaps different to other London boroughs? Shall I start with you, Julia?
I don't know about it has to be different, but housing. The issue is that most people who live in our borough and work in our borough can't afford to pay the rent in our borough, and that's not a Newham created problem. That's a government. It's a national
That's
problem.
a London-wide problem.
But we have to work out how in Newham we're going to look after our residents and our workers.
But with Newham building so many high rises, the expectation was that they would have middle class people moving into the area, and in that process they've forgotten the local working class. What's been done to help them?
I'm not anti some people moving into the borough.
No,
people have
absolutely
moved
not.
into the borough from all across the world
Sure.
forever, and that
Yeah.
should allow some
But at the
middle
same
class
time, you
people.
must not forget
Absolutely.
the socially and economically deprived sections of the community.
Yeah. And I think we need to work out how do we build social housing. The government does not make it easy for us, but I think we need a mayor who is looking at all the solutions of how they can provide as cheap and good housing as possible.
What do you think, Mr. Saunders? I'll be coming to you in a bit, Anna.
there are lots of really good boroughs in London, and I think we should be looking for ideas from other boroughs, other Labour Party leaders and cabinets. There's some really good ideas out there, and I think in a
But
way,
in terms of the problems that
has
you've
not
got,
happened
what
in
do you
Newham.
see as the most important problems that Newham have?
Well, things that affect me are not housing, because I have my own home,
Right.
but I do see housing as very important. I mean, where I live, there are an enormous number
What
of
about in terms
homeless
of child
people.
poverty? Because recently we've had that Tower Hamlet
Yeah,
has been the most deprived in terms of child poverty. I think it's in the top 10 or something. 54% or whatever the percentage was of children are living in poverty. Do you have a similar problem in Newham?
I think we have more or less the same problem in Newham, and I think it extends beyond the children. I mean, it extends to the youth up to about the age of 25, and I think that's an area where I personally would like to see some of our resources put.
Being put into and developed, right?
You know, facilities for young people. There are very few. There are less in Newham than there should be, and that's something I would hope our next band of councillors
We'll take that forward.
will take
What do you
forward,
think,
yeah.
John?
Well, I must admit, I do worry about the lack of youth provision in Newham when compared to Tower Hamlets in particular and Hackney, and I'm concerned that this has had an impact on our gang problem and the acid attacks. You know, Newham is unfortunately
The highest,
the
isn't it?
highest
Yes.
in London, and I really think that we need to think again, because our youth provision has been cut and it has been reduced, and again we need to lay the blame for this on this Conservative government, on 10 years nearly of austerity. However, there's a knock-on. You know, politics, socialism is about priorities, a famous Labour leader said. And as socialists trying to transform a borough, we have to look hard at how we make priorities and how we allocate our money. I'm really concerned about the lack of citizens' advice and law centres in Newham. The constituents come to me for help, and you know, they have to come at 6 o'clock in the morning to get tickets for the Citizens Advice Bureau to have any chance of getting advice. Councillors are being turned into sort of unpaid citizen advice volunteers. We're almost forced to try to give people welfare benefit advice when we're not trained or good
Sure.
at that.
Thanks, John. Very quickly, if you can. Please.
I was thinking of making a statement, but what I'm going to say, look, you want to look at Newham, you can look at Newham, as being very successful in the development projects. I mean, Westfield, at Olympic Park, high-rise building. It looks like that, yes, brilliant. We've created jobs. We've got like all these plush apartments here, and we've brought in the middle classes. And it looks, depending on which angle you're looking at it, it looks like that as though, yes, we are very successful, yeah? But then you can flip the coin and look at it. Is it really? Yeah, is it? Because
I have to stop because
aggressive gentrification.
we've come to the end of the program. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed our program this evening. Whoever the candidate is, we don't have any views, but the important thing is to ensure that the process is fair, it's democratic, and that each and every person is given the choice to choose a candidate. And whoever that candidate is, we hope that candidate will deal with the problems that affects the community at large. Until the next program, please keep well, and thank you for being with us. And thanks to our guests for coming along. Wishing you all a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.